It's interesting because what I have to say tonight is really weird because I feel quite uncomfortable about what I have to say. But isn't it interesting that when Beth got up here and started talking about authenticity and being authentic, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. So I have to take that as, as a leading from God because I haven't spoken to her. We haven't had any cross-communication. So in that sense, right on the page and the various things we've sung tonight are interesting. This is not in the middle and I can't cope with that. I'm really sorry. But actually, it's quite interesting because I'm going to talk about coping mechanisms. It has to be in the middle. I like that, yeah. Oh, that'll do, yeah. Oh, I suddenly feel at ease. It's funny what we need, isn't it, in life to make us feel okay. I have to have things in the middle. Other people have to have things slightly off key. We talk about it in IT, don't we? When you're designing, Heather likes things a particular way, and I'll say, no, I don't like that. She says, I like that, and I'll say, I don't like that. See what I mean? Because we all feel comfortable with a different thing. Anyway, drink first, because I'm very dry. Let me just say, what? It wasn't me, I promise. I'm not making funny noises. If you're here for the first time tonight and you're not sort of familiar with the way we operate, it doesn't matter. We're a group of people who seriously just want to be loved by God. Now, did you notice I didn't say want to love God? We do, but our first priority is letting God love us, because we believe that one of the things that has so been misunderstood by the church over the centuries is it's not what we do for God that counts. It's our understanding of what God has done for us. Aren't you glad that it's not about me tonight? Aren't you glad it's not about you? Aren't you glad it's not dependent on your achievements? Aren't you glad that we're totally dependent on God and his sacrifice tonight? So if you're here tonight, just open your heart and listen to what's got to be said. I'm not even going to use any scriptures tonight. I just really felt when Bob preached the other week, Bob Nichols came, and he talked about authenticity. And there was a question time at the end, and it really got quite messy because we were trying to define what was authentic and what was real. And it got a little bit messy, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to tackle that. I'm going to give it a go anyway. So I'm throwing some things out to you tonight. Doesn't mean to say that I've totally reconciled them in my own spirit, but it means that these are the things that have just come to me, and I want, just to share them with you. What I want to start is by asking the question, what's real and what isn't? I got a thing through the post the other day from Joe Brown's. I don't know whether anybody shops with Joe Brown's. It's a clothing outlet, and it was wonderful. The thing inside the cover, it says, "You were born an original, don't die a copy." Whoa. Who likes the sound of that? And then we can all say, oh, yes, no, I'm an original. I'm very true to myself. I'm very authentic. Well, I can stand here tonight and say categorically, there are some things where I know that I'm real, and there's other things which I know that I'm not. Mainly because there are things that I'm afraid that if I show that face, it won't be acceptable. I'll be rejected or what have you, so I suppress that. I'm a compliant by nature. I was brought up to do as I was told. Anybody in here are compliant? Where's the hands? Oh, a few. I do as I'm told. And I'm 54 years old now, and guess what? Chris still does as she's told. Yeah, because it was something that I adopted as a child that I thought, in order to be accepted and loved, this is who I need to be. But is it the real me? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Equally, there's some of you out there who adopted a different way of being, different mode of being. You decided you were going to fight, you were going to be assertive. Nobody was going to tell you what to do. Why? Because that was the way that you survived. But is that the real you? Do you get me? So what is the authentic? What is the real and what's not? Now, you see, we have to go back to childhood, really. Because, and you know, it's been wonderful having our Riley born last April. It's been quite a fantastic experience because having a baby in your house, especially when you're older, oh, it's much different from being a parent. Oh, it's much nicer. I like the phrase that says, I like being, is it, I love my grandchildren, I wish I had them first. Is it something like that? You know, I don't think I've got that totally right, but it's a thing that's said, isn't it, on the plaques you can get, you know. Yes, I wish I had my grandchild first. Heck, I've just added one, haven't I? Why? Because there's so much that I've learnt that now I can be different. I'm a different grandma than I was a mum. And why is that? Because there was so much that I learnt that I had regrets over, and I had to say, oh, you know, if I had my time again, I wouldn't do that. And when you're little, things are mirrored. And do you know what's so marvellous? And I can say this from experience with Riley. When he wakes up, you know, he's a bit groggy, and you bring him into the room, and you look into his face. The first thing he does is, did I do that quite good? Real bright-eyed smile. Why? Because he's looking for who loves and accepts him. And he's never in any fear of that acceptance not being there. It always is. We lay him on the floor to change his nappy. We look down at him. We smile at him. He smiles back. He is being mirrored a sense of worth that says, we're glad you're alive. We're glad you're with us. We love you. You're amazing. You're a gorgeous little boy. And so as soon as he opens his eyes, he looks for that. It's like he's looking in a mirror. And you know, when we have that sense of acceptance and worth mirrored to us right from that age, we grow up with an incredible security. And sadly, and there'll be people in here tonight who haven't grown up with that. I know that I didn't really. And it's sad because I grew up in a Christian family, which in fact should have done that. But it was that there was other distractions, other things that were more important. So that mirroring didn't get done to the level possibly it should have been. So if we don't get that mirroring back, we grow up with a sense of things aren't nice, things aren't safe. I'm not as worth what I'd like to be worth. I'm not as loved as much as I'd want to be worth. And if we misunderstand that sort of loving gaze right from early days, hey, that rhymed. I didn't realize it was going to rhyme there. We end up not really understanding that God is actually doing the same thing. He's our Heavenly Father. And actually, when we open our eyes on a morning, He's ready to go. Do you get that? Some of you say, no, He can't be. Because your view of God is one of quite austere, punishing, cross. I watched a program on the TV the other night, and it did me in, actually. Because it was a church in the United States who were placarding, you know, banners up, absolutely hateful of certain people and certain things. And they were doing this in the name of God. And it just hurt me so much because I'm thinking, how can this possibly be when God is so loving and so caring and so kind? So you see, I want to ask the question, did you get a loving gaze? Do you understand a loving gaze in your everyday life? Can you sort of parallel that to the gaze that you get from God on a regular basis? Did you sometimes get it? Did you never get it? Or can you say, oh, I always got it? Do you know what? Those that always got it somehow grow up to be more accepting of there being a lovely, lovely Heavenly Father who wants to give it. Isn't that true? Anyway, sadly, if we haven't received that sort of affirmation, we grow up very insecure. And this is not about apportioning blame to anybody. It's just that we have, as parents, a massive contribution that we bring into our children's life. And if we're only aware of it, we can fix it, can't we? Yeah? If we're aware of it, we can fix it. If we refuse to allow the truth to enter our awareness, there is no hope of changing anything. So if a child is not mirrored correctly, he has to find worth somewhere in something, somehow. And there's a lot of you in here tonight that have chosen a lot of solutions to try and find that worth. And unfortunately, when we're talking, as I said about the beginning, what is real and what isn't, where our non-authentic self comes from is the solutions that we choose to adopt to deal with the problems of life. And then we call that reality. We say, well, that's just me. But actually, it's not. It's the you that you've created to try and cope with life. And what's really sad about that is that we go through life actually with a mistaken identity. It's very sad, isn't it? Erickson, a guy who is quite big in the psychological world, I think he's dead now, but I don't know. I'm sorry if you're not, if you're listening. But anyway, he has an incredible sort of, I don't even know what to call it. But he talks about within the first year of a child's life, they've already decided whether people are trustworthy or not. Just get that. And I can give you the rest. If you want to know what happens between 1 and 3, and then 3 and 5, and then 5 and 9, and then 9 and 11, I can tell you. But I'm not going to do that because we haven't got time. But imagine in your first year of life, you already decided whether people were trustworthy or not. That's pretty awesome. Don't you find that incredible? So it shows you how important the environment in which children live is. Anyway, the false self is who we think we should be in order to be acceptable. We construct it as a mental self-image which we think people are going to accept and agree with, and then we live up to it. But actually it's very fragile. It has no substance because it's a fantasy. We're creating it in order to survive. And we live this life and it passes as us, but actually it's not really us. It's privately manufactured and maintained, and it's, I say of myself, this is what I am. But you know, the real self, what's unbelievable about this, and it's scary in one sense, the real self is attached to a different I am. And it's actually, I am as in Jehovah, the one who has created us, and we're a chip off the old block, who says, if you find your identity in me, then what you'll find is that you will live from the divine nature that flows from me to you, and you will find the result of it will be an inner abundance, a contentment, a peace, a happiness, even a pure joy, that ultimately you'll know everything is okay. And what I want to say right now at this point, and it doesn't matter if I don't say much more, it's if you are living with the sense that things aren't okay, it's probably because you've actually created a non-real you. Because if you're really living in the real you, which is attached to the I am, which is God, as opposed to the I am, which is me, then from that will flow an incredible peace and contentment, even when you're in the midst of adversity. Yeah? Does that sound good? So, I'm opening a can of worms, really, because we're all at different levels of authenticity, and some of us haven't a clue who we are. And I must admit, for me, I would say that for 47 years, I thought I was one thing. And then for the last 10, I've realized that a lot of things that I was were what I'd created to survive life. Can you accept that that's a possibility? You think, how can that possibly be? Yeah, it's true, because we all adopt things to find a way of coping with life. So each of us are at different levels of that level of trying to look at life as it is. And remember, life to some is really scary. We say, I can't cope with this, therefore I need something to make it work, to relieve the anxiety, to take away somehow the fear of it all. So our solutions that we pick are our attempt at bringing an end to the conflict of it that exists. And we long for acceptance and we long for security, so we choose various ways to make these things happen for us. And we can adopt things physically. We can go to the gym every day. We can adopt emotional things. How about deciding we're never going to trust anybody again? We can adopt psychological issues. And of course, we can adopt spiritual solutions. How about, I'll come to church regularly. I'll make sure that I have this understanding of God that makes everything all right. We can adopt solutions in every shape and every form. And we create a mode of being somehow that says, I'll make everything all right. And when all's said and done, we're not being real. And I've got a load of examples, but I'm not even going to bother with them tonight at all. But where I'm going to go to is now, to be real, we have to deal with all the imposters, with all the counterfeits who elbow in to take our real self's place. The real you is being willing to face life without adopting a solution, to believe that you are loved and accepted and can make it without the coping solution that has been adopted, and being able to be both assertive and compliant and do whatever is required in the moment because you are totally participating in the divine nature, which is the great I am, which is God. Now, if I speak the truth to somebody because I'm a bit of a compliant, and I find that their attitude towards me is rejection, and they don't like what I have to say, the thing that I want to do is automatically revert back into compliance. Isn't that the truth? So if somebody says something that upsets you, and you think, oh no, I really need to say something, but you're faced with rejection, then you're going to automatically revert back to the safe haven of that image that you've created for yourself. But Manning says this: honesty is the willingness to face the truth about ourselves, regardless of how threatening or unpleasant our perceptions may be. Self-confrontations require courage, but we prefer to be reassured of our virtues. He goes on to say it's impossible to insult a truly honest person because their inner poverty of spirit and rigorous honesty sets them free because they have nothing to be proud of. Whoa. So you see, when I start to operate in a more integrated way and I give up my solution of compliance, I immediately face up with a challenge, and I have got to decide, am I going to be honest or am I going to be dishonest and go back into my mode of being? Is any of this making sense? All of you can look at this and say, I don't know how this is affecting my life. Some of you are much more integrated than others, but there's some who might need to hear this tonight. So, if I'm an honest person, if somebody says something to me that is hurtful and that challenges my view about myself, if I'm really honest, I cannot be insulted. If I'm really honest, I can't be insulted. Now, why do I say if I'm really honest? Because I will hear what has been said and I will say, is there any truth in this? And I had a situation a little while ago, and I have to use it. I'm sorry, I can't hypotheticalize this, but I'd said to somebody, well, Lisa actually helped me with this. And sorry, Lisa, I've got to use it. She said to me some while ago, she said, sometimes people hurt us, and we never tell them that they've hurt us in order that they might do something about it. And isn't that the truth? True at times? We just hold it in our house and we say, well, they hurt me, but I'm not going to say anything about it. I'll just put up with it. But if we were to say, you hurt me, maybe we could actually bring some resolution. Anyway, I did this with somebody and I said, something happened a while back and, you didn't seem to care about what I was going through at the time. And this person replied, they said, well, if I had done, you'd have just said you were okay. Do you know what? That was the truth. Now, I could say, yes, but it hurt me. This person should have cared for me anyway. No, that was the truth. So how can it insult me? Do you see my point? So if I allow that to come into my heart and for God to use it to say, hey, chappie, I'm wanting to develop you here. This is what you're like in your life. This is how you operate. But I want you to grow and be different. I hear those words and I'll say, yeah, that's the truth. And guess what? I can't be insulted. Do you not find that amazing? Now, of course, if it's not the truth, you can say, I'm sorry, I think you've misunderstood or what have you. But most of the time, how many times is God opening the door for you to really see yourself? God's using people to give you a little window into your life. But if we reject it and shut the door immediately and say, oh, fancy, instead of saying, do you know what? That's true. It is true. I'll be honest. Anybody who says to me, how are you doing? What does Chris Chapman say? Come on, you'll all know it. If anybody says, how are you doing? What do I say? Fine. Am I fine? Probably not. But would I say fine? Yes. So do you get my point? So why would anybody bother to say, are you all right? Really? Because I'm going to say, yeah. I don't know whether you're understanding me. I hope God, the Holy Spirit is helping you with this, because the truth that I'm trying to convey to you, and I'll use me as the example, I have created an image, but it's not the real me. Some of it's real, some of it's not. And God's got to deal with it. He wants to strip away everything that I have adopted to be the solution that keeps me coping, because He wants to be my source. He wants to be my source. And we could use many examples. We hit the bottle, we hit the town, we go to work, we go to the gym, we tell lies, we cheat, we steal. Solutions. Eating disorders. Sexuality. I can think of hundreds that we tap into as a solution to the things that we feel. Is any of this making sense? I hope it is. So anyway, being authentic is not about extremes. It's about finding a middle ground. It's living in a tension. If you think of it like this, real in the middle. We've got over here of the seesaw is what's called hyper-authenticity. And at this side, we've got what you would call hypocrisy. Ooh. None of us like the extremes, but I'll tell you, most of us live at the extremes. The real self lies in the middle there. Some people, they think they're being real when they're what's called hyper-authentic, and I want to just talk about this a little bit. The word fake will be used a lot when people are hyper-authentic. They'll talk about who's fake. Oh, that's fake. They're being fake. It's a response, actually, that's coming from a very hurt heart because they've had to deal with pretense an awful lot, and they've hated it, and they've decided, I want reality in my life. But because of it, they tend to push the pendulum far this way. Hyper-authentic people have an attitude that say, I'll only do it if I want to. No, I'm not going to do that unless I really want to. They won't do things to please people because they have to do it because they want to. Do you know what I mean? They're sort of a bit bolshy. And if you upset them, take cover because, they're givers, but only if they really feel generous, because if they don't feel generous, they're not going to give an inch of their time, anything, because they want to control who they are and say, I'm not going to be taken advantage of in any way. A little way of explaining this is a little story of a waiter in a cafe. A hyper-authentic will not make a good waiter. Let me tell you why. Because the waiter isn't a waiter, really. He's just a person. But when he comes into the restaurant, he puts on his pinny. Oh, that's not a masculine word, is it? He puts on his apron and he puts on a mode of being. It's not his real being. It's artificial. It's foreign to him. He's just learnt the role because his trade demands it. But the more he plays the role, the more natural it becomes. But, do you remember what I said? The hyper-authentic doesn't make a good waiter. Why? Because he is what he is, no pretense, no deceit, but guess what? No tip. Have you ever been in a restaurant where the waiter was hyper-authentic? Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, this is my job, but I'm not really going to serve you. I've had a bad night, and your girlfriend's left me, and throwing food onto the table. You've all experienced, haven't you? You know, the waiter who doesn't really know that you're there to serve. Have you? Have you experienced that? Because he hasn't taken his role seriously. That's why I say a hyper-authentic doesn't do the waiter thing very well. You see, Jesus hated hypocrisy because that was acting, that's pretense. But equally, he doesn't like hyper-authenticity either because it's a control that says nobody's going to mold me into anything that I don't want to be. But what Jesus wants is for us to be imitators of himself. Now I'm going to say something now which is going to totally confuse some of you. To be real, in that case then, you need to be fake. Oh heck, what have I just done? I've just gone through all of this to bring you to that point. Let me explain. You see, people who say they want to be authentic refuse to take on an imitating role of Christ because they have this idea, well, if I have to do it, if I have to make myself do these things, how can that be real? Do you get it? But you see, the thing is that like any solution that we pick up, and we've covered some of them in what we've just been talking about, any solution that we pick up, you have to practice it over and over again before you become it. Isn't that the truth? And yet we would say, yes, but to be like Christ, that would mean that I have to mold myself into this or mold myself into that. We're quite willing to mold ourselves into all sorts of other things, aren't we? Be honest. We talked about it. The child that grows up what is it at that point? It's got choices, and it can decide whether it's going to become anything. And it will choose good, it will choose bad, it will choose some beneficial things, it will choose some not so beneficial things. And he will become it just purely by practice and rehearsal and learning how to be. Is that not true? And yet we'll say, but surely to imitate Christ, that's not real. Making sense? One leads to life because he says, if you imitate me, I'm going to open the way for you to have everything that I am, everything of heaven flow into your life. If you'll just imitate me, just do as I do. And yet we'd say, oh no, that means I'm going to lose myself. Oh yeah, but how many things do we lose ourselves in life in general? Come on, be honest. We lose ourselves in so many things. Imitation is adopting patterns of being that seem foreign and unnatural. But we do it all the time. Don't we? Do it all of the time. See, I do not presently have the character of Christ in me, but I am presented with an opportunity to play at being Christ. Play at being. Just like the waiter, the guy plays at being the waiter, and the more he does it, the more he becomes professional at it, the more he is able to take on that character. I'll tell you what, the tip will be pretty brilliant at the end of it, won't it? Are you not good tippers here? You're very quiet. No, I don't think you tip. I think that's why you're quiet, because you don't tip. I do. I'll tell you what, if somebody served me well, I want to give him a good tip. I play at being, imitating Christ until Christ is realized in me. What is first artificial or feels artificial becomes rooted, and I become transformed. Imitation feels false and insincere, but we keep doing it even when it feels contrary to what we're feeling in the moment. We would say, well, surely that's this side then. This is hypocrisy. No. Because you see, I was in Christ before I was in Adam. So the Adam in me is what causes me to crave after other solutions, crave after other things to fill the gap, crave after other things to bring unity in my conflicted heart. And yet Jesus is saying, just imitate me. I'll bring unity into your heart. See, we're not attempting to act in order to fake or deceive, but we're acting in order to retrain and be transformed. Because like I said, we were in Christ before we were in Adam. Imitation then of Christ is perfectly authentic. True freedom comes as a result of imitating Christ. So, to be authentic, I must let go of all the solutions that I've adopted to bring a sense of unity to my life and instead imitate Christ. Has that been clear? If you play at being real, you'll become it. So, what I'd like to ask, what have you adopted? What solution have you adopted? What have you put on to somehow bring an end to the conflict that seems to be going on in your life? What you feel you don't like, what you don't approve of, the thing that you do to create the acceptance and the security and the approval of others. What is it that you're doing? Are you willing to lay that down, surrender it, and say, I'll give it up, and what I'm going to do is live in that middle place where it might not feel so good, but what I know is I am being real. I want to ask God and say, Lord, bring whatever it is into my awareness, that I might be able to surrender it, because it's exhausting living out a false life. It's exhausting. We have to jump through hoops. And I know God has really helped me over these last few years, because I know for a fact that my compliance, and I'm using that just as an example because there's many other illustration, causes me at times to not be the real me. There's sometimes I want to say, no, no, I don't want that. And yet something inside says, you say no, they're not going to be your friend anymore. If you say no, they're not going to like you anymore. If you do this, it's not. Equally, some people find other examples in their life a problem. For me, it's one of being able to say, I am not happy with this, and be able to live with the rejection that comes from that. And instead of wanting to say, I'll change my mind because I prefer the acceptance to the truth. Oh, think about it. Some of us will do all sorts for acceptance, even to the expense of truth in our lives. I find that really, for me, it's quite daunting, and I know that God is dealing with that in me. So, this is my appeal to you tonight. In this house, we do believe that we are trying, and I'm going to say that, trying to be real. Because I would have to put my hand up and say, in some areas I know that I've tackled being real, but there are other places where I know I still fail because I crave after people's approval or acceptance. And I have to yield it to God, and I have to say, God, I would rather be rejected. I would rather feel empty. I would rather lose that friendship than not stand for reality and what is truth. Now, I know this is quite heavy tonight, but I'm only going on what I really believed God wanted me to bring. So this is what I want to say at the end as sort of a final thing. And if anybody wants my notes, you can, because I've missed a whole bit out, and it probably would have been better if I'd have put it in. It might have made more sense. But anyway, here's the thing at the end. What I want to pray is a prayer for those who want to say, yeah, I recognize there are things in me that I need to be dealt with because it's not the real me. It's things I'm hiding behind. There are things I'm using to cope with life, and I want to surrender them to God because I want Him to be real through me. I want to imitate Him and let His life through me. And this is what I want to say, is this, a prayer, that Lord, I might have never seen your face in my parents as a child. That loving gaze I might have never seen. Life circumstances may not have reflected back your loving gaze either. You might have been abused, you might have struggled, you might have been abandoned. There might have been also so many things that have caused you to not see the face of God. You may be saying, I struggle to see anything good in me. This is what we're going to ask. Let me see your loving gaze today. Help me stop adopting other solutions to protect myself, and help me play at being you until I'm transformed to mirror you perfectly. The loving gaze that I receive constantly will determine my worth, and I will relax knowing that I am loved and accepted. This will make my world a safe place. Be still, my soul. Cast all your anxieties upon the Lord, because He cares for me. I will put my hope in God and declare, it is well with my soul. There's a story in Samuel where King David, who was a most incredible guy, a lot of problems as well. Great example to us all, because we can probably find ourselves in him, can't we, in some way. There was a point where he'd killed a Goliath with a sling and, really got a great victory for the Israelites. And it's not long that he flees and he's running away from Saul, who wants to kill him. And he ends up in this place, and I don't know how to pronounce the word. Is it Achish? King Achish? Something like that. And because he was afraid, he's just killed a giant. And because he was so afraid in that situation, he pretended to be mad. Fantastic story. Because you think, well, what has changed from one moment to another? He's standing in a valley and he's saying to you, come and get me, because basically I'm gonna get you. And yet all of a sudden he's just with what you would call a normal situation, and he's terrified. And I remember many years ago, Anth preached on this, and he said, will the real David stand up? Because at that moment he wasn't being real. He was doing things that were a solution for his protection or perceived protection, but ultimately he wasn't operating or participating in the divine nature of the great I am. God was great still to him, wasn't he? I mean, how fantastic. Isn't God very gracious? But who knows what would have happened even with that king in that situation? I don't know. But what, again, I want to just say tonight is, will the real stand up? Will the real Heather? Real Maggie? Use your own name in there. Will the real, let me use my name, will the real Chris stand up? Will she stop grabbing at other solutions to bring security and acceptance and approval? And will she participate in the divine nature, be an imitator of Christ, and therefore be real?